Data Storytellers. Today on the show, I have with me Charles Pich. Charles is the director of analytics at GameStop. GameStop is quite a name because recently you might have heard about GameStop in the news. I think it was a fascinating development to follow. And today with Charles, we're going to talk about some data-related topics, mainly around his journey as an analytics professional, and what are his insights and experiences on implementing organizational change. So first of all, Charles, welcome on the show.
Thank you. No, appreciate it.
So Charles, I checked out your LinkedIn profile, of course, because as I mentioned, recently we did some really cool interviews with gaming-related companies, Activision Blizzard and Minecraft. Would you mind just telling me a few words about how you got into the world of analytics?
Yeah, I think I kind of fell into it coming out of my undergrad in 2009. I think a very catastrophic event in terms of the United States, being that we were during a market crash and subprime mortgages failing. And I was fortunate enough to kind of walk into an organization that was trying to take advantage of that opportunity with the government loans and AMP and TARP and those things that were happening in the industry. And it was a loss mitigation firm, hedge fund company called Bayview Financial. And I really got to start there, really understanding just data in general and how it's cultivated within an organization. And then from there, really got to hone in on what kind of technical capabilities are available, whether it's SQL, whether it's R, whether it's a mix of other SaaS platforms that you can use in order to get data from its source state all the way into a refined state that can actually be actionable. So that just got myself highly motivated, and where else you could explore with this information, what other companies would explore this information, what other industries do very well with this information, and then that kind of ping pong chess game between art and science was always one that I just stuck to, learning from people that were in the industry that use data, but also use some sort of level of gut and instinct and smart founders that understand the business, but really, hone in on data as an opportunity to really find out what's going on in their business and kind of action on it.
Got it. So what is your mandate now over at GameStop? You joined in 2021, July, so just over a year ago. First of all, before we get into specifically your mandate, so GameStop was in the news. I have to admit that I don't know that much about exactly what happened, but now when you say GameStop, people kind of recognize the name from the news. So what actually happened and how did you end up there?
Yeah, I mean, GameStop's been a polarizing brand for a long time, especially just in the gaming world in relation to video games and consoles and just the people themselves. There's a high just affluency of folks that just enjoy and love, playing video games. They just love the aspect of, that world. And then that also extends out to hobbies and collecting and everything that goes into trading cards and all the things you can name of. And it's really, a strong community of folks that just are really, the brand is a very powerful, power to the players has been something that's been around, since, test of time, it's tested the time in terms of what GameStop has brought to the table. And they've utilized that, for the brand in order to keep introducing more and more opportunities within the brand and membership to explore. So GameStop for the macroeconomic environment, during the pandemic, there was a big craze around, what was, meme stock and all the things related to what was going on there. But all in all, they were really trying to hone us in on what was this interchanging world between brick and mortar and e-commerce. And you saw a large number of industries that moved into e-commerce or developed initially in e-commerce and had massive success. And GameStop was no secret to that, where they were doing the same thing and leveraging their online platform, leveraging their e-commerce, opportunities in order to deliver on that customer experience. But I think what has been the best story is the fact that not does GameStop have this e-commerce presence that was there before, and they kind of maximize that, is that they have 3,000 stores across the United States and globally, where now that brick and mortar member type of awareness, where the people can come into the store, they can get the product, they can get the perspective and get the experience, firsthand. And it's something that's been a differentiation to the brand itself. So while GameStop's been polarizing in a lot of different areas, especially in the retail trading aspect of it, it's been even more polarizing for just the community and advocacy for video games and how that's transcended, especially during a lot of transformations in the environment.
Got it. And then how did you find those guys? Like, actually, how did you start a conversation with GameStop about you coming on board, and why did they hire you? What was your mandate?
Yeah, there's it was no secret that there's been a lot of folks from a lot of great organizations, whether it's e-commerce, whether it's Amazon or Chewy, Belk, Kohl's, and et cetera. A lot of great companies of folks that have come in, and they've brought in a lot of their folks that they knew in their network in order to try to help transform this brand. So I was part of that group. There was folks from my old networks in terms of Chewy that had come into the organization. They have been highly, widely successful in terms of what they've done in other organizations as well. And I was fortunate enough to be, asked as part of those groups to try to see if there was an opportunity for myself to lend a hand in what we were trying to do. And that's how it all came together. And the mandate, what it's been inside the organization is really just, the points I just labeled before. It's been about how can we take data and really understand who our customers are, what the products that they like the most, what are they shopping for, what are the the massive trends that are coming down the pipeline, and how we can leverage all those things in order to shape what GameStop is already today and what it has been and where it's going forward.
Got it. So with your previous organization, so of course Cisco, at Cisco, were you working on Cisco's analytics offerings, or were you working with analytics within the organization, like actually helping Cisco to leverage their own data better?
Right, that's what I was doing. So the second, their service and capabilities organization, I got it was a unique spot in my career where I've been working for this hedge fund company for some time. I've been gaining a lot of experience, in the novice way, learning about data warehouses, learning about the ecosystems, learning about, writing SQL, learning about doing all the things that any analyst would, but then also trying to really cultivate my kind of like customer to, business to technical stakeholder interaction. And Cisco had this, they're the consulting type org. They're the biggest technology company in the world. They have massive amount of capabilities and services that they offer, across a ton of industries. And this is an opportunity where I was going to be able to lead a small team and then work on a number of different projects within their service and capabilities network. And that was providing analytics around those capabilities, how they're performing, where it was selling, et cetera. And it really just kind of honed in my, communication, honed in the way that, you speak to stakeholders, gather project requirements, and really build a final product along the way.
Got it. So actually, also one of the reasons why I asked is because if I look at your background, you worked at a variety of companies. Most of them are like pretty big, right? So Chewy, I think that's basically a 10,000 plus company. Then we look at BoxyCharm, that's actually a little bit smaller, right? But you do have that like large corporate type of engagement when it comes to analytics. So my first question would be that over this time that you got into analytics, it wasn't that long ago, but 10 years, 10 years is a long time in the 21st century, especially in the world of analytics. So how have you seen changes in the industry? Have you seen like a growing influence of data analytics practitioners at these large companies?
Yeah, I mean, to go back to the first part, these companies got big, but when I got in them, 2016 for Chewy, it was a pretty awesome time just because they were growing immensely. They had I believe when I came into the company, the only thing you could find was a Wikipedia about the company. There was no real press around it. And then obviously the company what it is today and what all those great folks have done, even to what Ryan has done and what Sumit has done at this point, where the company has grown, et cetera. And then at BoxyCharm, I had the fortunate opportunity to be, employee number 22 in the company. So we were very fortunate to massively grow that company. Joe Martin, who's, a big founder for that group and all the different executives that were part of that. We went from that size to selling the company for, $500 million in November of, 2020. So I was, very fortunate to kind of get the ability, and to your point, like go into these organizations where analytics was kind of more of, hey, we're figuring this out. We have a number of either Excel reports, or we have another static reports, or we have this consulting company that's leveraging, building things out. And we really want to broaden that. We want to enrich that. We want to build out what a strategy is. So over my tenure, what I found is that no matter the size of the company or the scale of the company where it's at, there's been, there's massive transformation shifts in terms of how they look at hiring, whether a company wants to be, look, we want analytics needs to be self-service, and we just want a bunch of folks that can figure out very complex problems. We want data scientists, we want BI developers, we want, engineers that can kind of cultivate this information. And then there's other times where you want, an immense amount of folks that are really business oriented, and analysts and product managers that are going into the business and finding out, local problems, or, cross-departmental problems, and then finding ways to either attack it with analytics tools. And that doesn't always mean, oh, look, we're going to create a really sophisticated model, or we're going to create a nice visualization. It might just be, how do we streamline? How do we create automation? How do we take out, reduce the friction between teams? So from your point in terms of transformation, I feel as if, the roles have always changed. I think when I was starting up, it was analyst only, and then it turned to statistician or economist, and then it went to data scientist, and now you go engineer, which was always something on the software side, and then that's gone into BI engineer, to even analytics engineer, folks that are building DBT models, people that are utilizing really strong, cloud modern data stacks. All those things all together, what I've seen that kind of still rings true is that the people I find to be, highly successful, at least in my walk so far, and I've been very fortunate to be around these folks, are those that can tie the string between the technical requirements and the stack itself to the business expectations and the priorities that they have laid out. And so I think even though the practitioners, the names, et cetera, and those different mindsets have changed, that is still ring true, and so far has been successful for me.
So this is really interesting. So you brought this up, and it comes up all the time in the podcast that we love to explore. So this connection between the technology and the business needs. So when we approach this topic, first of all, how do you think that data analytics right now is being viewed still in the corporate world? So I would be interested in your take on what the senior leadership of these big companies still think about what data analytics is. Then we can talk about what it actually can deliver, and then how to bridge that gap.
Yeah, so I think no matter what, like big size of the company and who those executive leaders are, analytics is a tool, it's a resource for them to lean on to, because they know how strong data points can be. They know that it can refute and confirm assumptions. It can really it's very agnostic to every other opinion in the organization, regardless. You're gonna have folks that have been in organizations for 20 years or 20 months or 20 days, and data always kind of rings true. At the same time, the best executives I know that there's also a maturation with data, and there's also a soft and kind of an art and science with data, where you can't take everything that the data gives you as the way to move, right? You can't say, hey, look, we're growing 40% month over month, week over week in e-commerce. Let's just throw away every other strategy we have and move forward. And then, or we're throwing brick and mortar, and then the pandemic happens, right? So there's this art and science approach that every executive that I've seen, that are really successful, that take into consideration when they're looking at data. But all in all, they look at analytics as, this is a tool set that I have. I look at it as in terms of capabilities and folks. So I have the right infrastructure that's being maintained. I have the right folks to maintain it. And then that in consideration is how they budget that is on the basis of, how they prioritize the rest of the business. Because you can be highly successful in my mind by having the right strategy, still having a lean organization, and leveraging analytics to your, to the needs that you have, either intermediate or, what you're building in the future. You don't always have to go strong one way or the other. A lot of companies that we've recently, I think, seen got in trouble is massively hiring into these areas, bringing in a ton of folks. And then those folks are probably saying, okay, what do you want me to do? And they're just like, grab some data and figure it out. And that's great in terms of the curious nature. And look, you're going to put a lot of smart folks that have a lot of capable minds into a room and be able to figure out things. But if you don't have a plan or action, how you're actually going to do those things, or at least some sort of understanding of what your direction is around your data, you seem to fall on your face. And the worst part is that I hate seeing is that you do that, and then a lot of folks get laid off, right, because of that, and it's really tough. So it's one of those things where I think companies leverage it, they understand it, but they're also really understanding of it, of that it's part in art and science, and how they want to utilize in the business.
So this art and science, again, if you look at our logo, the whole idea between the right brain and the left brain, the creative brain, the expensive thinking, the creative inspiration, the hot cognitive kind of language, and then you have the left brain, which is more about dealing with logic and dealing with these strict concepts, really focusing on certain things, really about the human decision-making process of buying into something emotionally that then you have to justify with logical means. Now, you guys have the second one, really just it comes part and parcel with the territory, that you are the purveyors of truth. You own that truth, and you have the capability to assess that better than anyone in the organization. But then that truth can be hard to accept and be taken on board by the business. You know, that scene comes from, I don't know the movie, but you know, Jack Nicholson and Tom Cruise, and you can't handle the truth. Well, right. how do you what is your approach? So let's dig into this art and science a little. So sure. What is your approach, first of all, when you come into an organization and you want to make sure that this whole data drivenness is not just a buzzword, because of course everyone says that we want to be data driven, but when it comes to walking the walk, now that's a different conversation. So what is your method to making sure that people are not change resistant from the get-go? How do you position yourself to begin with? How do you think that data analytics leader should be seen by the organization so you can begin the relevant conversations?
Yeah, I think, there's a couple, one thing I preach across all the teams I've ever, been fortunate enough to manage is you have to have a real strong level of empathy. You have to understand that, when you're looking at data, it's very agnostic, and there's a lot of folks that are doing a lot of things, as you have to expect that they're doing things for the best of the business and trying to create action and value in the organization. And just because those things haven't come to fruition doesn't mean they had the wrong intentions. They may just not have the right information, right? And that's our responsibility. And that's the second part, which is, when I come to the organization, it doesn't matter what level that I'm at, I am a support to the organization, whether you are a merchandising assistant or you're the founder of the company. And my role and our role in the organization is to create products that make it easier for you to understand your complex business and give you the right opportunities to make actions on those in the most with the most amount of information. And so the way I think about that, that art and science, is that when I come into an organization, first thing I'm trying to figure out is what are the problems that we're trying to solve, and no matter how simple they are or how complex they are. And then also, what are the problems that we can solve, to kind of what I say is like when you clean the room, right? When you look at the room to clean the room, you start picking up the dirty clothes to begin with, right? You start picking up things here and there before you start transforming the mood. Maybe start moving the beds to one side or the dresser to the other, right? But so what you need to do is really understand where are those small key wins that you can build up off of, and not just think, hey, where I've seen some of my peers sometimes have struggles is you come into an organization and you're like, okay, this is a massive opportunity here. Let me focus on that. And you work yourself into 12 months of adding no products or value. And then that company is shifted 3 to 4 times already, just because of the macroeconomic environment or the people that are in those places or the decision makers that are there today. And so going into that space, I find that you find a really good relationship with the business and able to figure out that art and science by coming in with a sense of empathy and understanding of what was trying to be completed and the folks that are here today. B, understanding that you're the support arm to them and that your responsibility is to make them as knowledgeable about the complex parts of your business. So that means, we get access to all this complex information. We provide these really sophisticated tools. We know how to do this sophisticated code. But at the end of the day, if I brought a dish over to somebody with, unbaked noodles and a side of some pesto sauce and, a block of cheese, they'd be like, "What is this?" My responsibility is make them spaghetti, and then they know what it is, and they can eat it. And but little to them, the complex nature that happened to that point, they don't need to understand to know about at that grain. They don't need to be in the kitchen. And so that's the biggest part for me as I again these organizations and try to connect the dots between the business and the technical side of the business is making sure I'm ingrained, have a sense of empathy, and then understand that our goal is to support them as much as possible.
I like that analogy with the noodles and the spaghetti. To kind of continue that like culinary analogy, sometimes you can cook like the best, juiciest steak, but it turns out that the person is a vegetarian, right? So and we've seen this before when even if the macroeconomic like circumstances don't really change that much, still you can end up building something that's beautiful, wonderful, it can do amazing things, but people just simply won't use it. So this is like one of the highest risks that we've seen, is that this just looks horrible. You can't use that then to leverage the further evangelization of analytics in the business, but also you are just seen as a cost center as the analytics function. So if you think about this, you mentioned that you have to apply this empathy. So when you approach this specific area, and you really want to become this data consigliere. One of our collaborators, Pete Williams, who's the director of data and online at Penguin Random House, has this concept of you can be the most influential person in the company if you position yourself well. And the right way to think about it is that support function that you mentioned, the data consigliere. Like in The Godfather, the consigliere is the most influential person. Now, the consigliere asks good questions. So how do you make sure that you can actually create that unique connection with the business through the right questions? Like, how do you build these relationships? What was your approach in your career?
Yeah, I think, as you approach, stakeholders throughout the organization, what most people would probably, and I would say most people, but there's probably a sense that, you go to the C-suite, you go to the CEO, you say, hey, what do we want to do in the business, right? And they have a ton of on their plate from all different directions, regardless if it's a public or private traded company. And they have a lot of things to answer. They're going to have an understanding of the overarching goals across the business, right? But really, the folks and the stakeholders and the leadership roles across the organization, your director of supply chain, your director of purchasing, folks within your merchandising org, right? Your category managers, your product manager, pricing manager, those folks are going to have the most understanding of what their specific goals and needs in the organization. And then you can understand how to transmit that type of results, but all focusing on the goals that are laid out across the top of the business itself. So to get that kind of level of communication, that relationship requires going into those businesses and understanding those challenges and start gathering some sort of relationship in terms of the type of products they need to be successful. Not everyone's the same. Like you said, if I go in and just say, I'm going to make steaks for everyone because everyone loves Kobe steaks. Everyone loves that. Who doesn't love that? Everyone loves a cheeseburger, right? But if you're serving it to people that don't like that food or don't even need that food, right? Then you're going to find yourself unsuccessful. You find yourself creating just for the sake of creating. That's one thing that we preach on the team is don't create work, create value, right? So, and the only way to create value is understanding what the valuable thing is, right? If somebody that, a fish that's in the ocean doesn't need more water, right? So you need to understand how and what those needs are. So by doing so, you can understand this person and, a stakeholder might just need a massive amount of automation. They just may need to streamline something that they're doing today that usually takes them 4 to 5, 6 hours or 4 to 5, 6 days, and getting that to a micro, task in their organization to then think about all the other things they need to do, while other folks have purely nothing. And so something as simple as just the core metrics of their business or the core fundamental pieces of their business is going to make them highly more valuable. And what you find is by delivering on those, I would say small, what it would feel like, but delivering on those core values of the organization, you lift those people up. Now they can walk into those rooms with highly amount more confidence. They can portray their business to their stakeholders. They can talk very open and simply, and talk about, you know, the complex things of their business in a very sophisticated way. Now with that confidence they're gaining from you, you start really building the right relationship, and they start leaning on you. You start building trust, you start building accountability, you start building a lot of things that when the time comes, and now as you start ingraining yourself, that's when you're talking about that singular, that recommendation, the influence that you have, you can start laying on because you built that trust. And you can say, hey, look, we've approached these things. I have a great something that I've built in the past around how you can manage your purchasing cycle. This is what, you know, this is what I like to put in, or you could just go with it and they're going to trust you because of the length of relationship that you build already.
Got it. And then, okay, so you take those steps and you do your due diligence to really connect with your target audience. By the way, if you run a small business and you want to build a good product for a specific target audience, you do the same things. You kind of have the same responsibility. Like the analytics function, it's almost like a business within the business, and you need to think about it as an entrepreneur and develop the right product that people actually need and will like, then brand it properly, to make sure that it's well received, market it properly, sell it properly. On that note, did you find yourself having to pitch data analytics in these companies to key stakeholders? Have you thought about it that way? That, okay, I need to present this, people are not familiar with it, I kind of need to sell this idea.
Absolutely. I think, you know, you say the words like, I had a conversation with Peer recently, a friend of mine who's in the same space, like the word AI or data science, machine learning, right? You say that in an organization, everyone's like, absolutely, we need to do this, right? It's been on every conversation I've had and every single, you know, a conference I've been at. But when you actually bring that to fruition, the complex nature or the gap in knowledge, or you know, the intangibleness that comes with that, that's tough for people to swallow and commit to, especially in this harsh environment where things are ever changing. And so you find yourself having to really build the blocks, the foundational blocks to get there. You know, when we were at a company, I would say at Chewy, right, we had some really two strong data scientists in the organization, and they were there from day one, and they had not been utilizing any of the data science skill sets that they had, because at the time we didn't need them to be running such sophisticated analysis. We really just needed to get a strong amount of visibility, get the right, you know, information in front of our most highly actionable folks. And it was really about building a sense of reporting and standardizing, adding automation and putting the, you know, the right terms of visibility in front of folks. But as we started to grow, my responsibility as a leader was to start putting in those little pieces every once in a while to those stakeholders and to those leaders about, hey, why, you know, there's an opportunity, we could look at this around linear regression. We could forecast the way that we're looking at buying. We could look at clustering folks in the way that we're, you know, looking at how we price, et cetera. And all those came from the great conversations of having with those, you know, leaders, director of pricing, you know, those leaders on the merchandising side. But as we start to gain and build that confidence, those recommendations make all the sense. They're not even recommendations. That's just, hey, we're trusting what you're doing anyways. This is another thing that we're leaning on you. And you start becoming not just a support or a cost center to the business. You start becoming, you know, a peer. You start becoming somebody that with a voice in the organization, like that of many other, you know, resounding leaders in the organization. So that's where I'm very fortunate enough to be successful. You have those strong folks, so it's that easy to do so, but you can't come out the gate and try to introduce things that, you know, they won't fall on their face once you gain that trust and are able to exhibit what that impact will be on the business. But you have to start with some sort of foundational building in order to get there. And that, you know, I was at, like you said, a company, BoxyCharm. We were fortunate to have, you know, a great amount of success. You know, the COO that was there, you know, he was very strong in terms of the data-driven culture that he wanted to create as we walked in, but he had a really good understanding of how we needed to get there and build to get there. And then we had a great founder there as well that really understood that soft, you know, the art and science approach. So when it did come time to say, look, we need to start adding things like a CDP, or really starting to look at behavioral segments or build churn propensity modeling, that was very organic to do so because we had already created the necessary foundational blocks to do so. And so the risk feels like it's less risky for you to do it because you already have all this other knowledge, and just introducing that is just having another weapon at your exposure to be able to utilize for the business.
Yeah, and make better decisions. Because in sales, like few people know, but when we deal with different emotions during a sales process, which actually makes people sometimes uncomfortable, like a sales process, but the archetype of the 70s used car salesman is kind of like an illusion. It doesn't really how real sales work. It's about relationships. It's about creating value. It's about establishing trust. But when you're like trying to sell, the positive emotions of trust, excitement, those are the waves that you need to ride. And at the same time, the negative emotions are the things that can stand between you and the person really buying into your idea. And those negative emotions, few people know that the worst of all of those emotions is actually confusion. Right. So it's better than if your target audience hates you, you're in a better position than if they are confused. So you said that there's, for example, this gap in knowledge, which is one of the building blocks. If you want to make yourself indispensable and essential in the business and really integrate analytics into the organization, like this is one of the building blocks, I guess. So how do you approach closing that gap? Because we already talked about empathy and coming closer to the business needs so you can build meaningful products. But at the same time, a lot of companies use targeted approaches with, okay, now we need to raise data literacy, and they establish data academies and try to educate the organization from another angle. What is your take on this? What do you think works best? One or the other, or maybe something in between?
Yeah, I think it's like any of the products that you build in an organization, it's about that iterative build, and it's not just you're going to spend that first X amount of months or time in organization just building out documentation. Instead, what you want to do is it's a combination of sorts, right? So it's like you want to build out that data literacy and lineage, and you want to have those things so you can maintain a really strong sense of data quality management, both internally and externally, right? So that you can understand how the data source is coming in, what are the business rules applied, what does it actually mean, what are this actual metrics composed of, et cetera. I tell my, the way we tell the team all the time is we have to be the smartest people about the metrics and the things in the business than the actual stakeholders themselves. We need to know more about supply chain than the head of supply chain, not from, the operational aspect, but all the intricacies of the data and why, when we look at this, it needs to do this and et cetera, and then be able to convey that in a very simplistic manner. So to your point, confusion, is the worst because it takes people's you lose that confidence. So folks that are confused, they're not going to adhere to anything that you're saying because they have no idea what you're talking about. The other part is that a lot of folks have been doing a lot of things for a long time and they know a lot of things. They're going to go back to what feels comfortable, right? Everybody's going to grab that blanket that feels comfortable, which is their gut, right? And they're going to say, well, let's just use the data point that I know, right? I know that about this data point, so we're going to use it. And that's going to give you bias. And that's going to not allow you to be able to open other doors or be able to look at other things in the organization. So a part of any, product released or any, think of a sophisticated data model, it's imperative that yourself and the data scientists and the other groups involved that are putting the right information in a very digestible sense to the business before presenting. It shouldn't just be, here are the results, here's the complexity of the results, this is what we should do. Instead, you have to take 4 to 5, 6 other additional steps to convey it in a manner that's digestible. Then you need to document it, and then you need to workshop it. It's good to also understand, like, here's a massive, complex product that you've created. But imagine if you took 1/10 of that and just located that for one specific part of the business, and then were able to get wins on that one particular part of the business because you introduced to them attachment. Hey, these are the products that are purchased together. We clustered these products. We took some historical understanding of what things are purchased with what. And then now we're forecasting based off those other activities that we're perceiving that are going to happen with some level of accuracy, that this is why people buy this. And if we sell this, we should put this next to this. And as you start talking like that, folks go, I understand that. And it's one subset of the business. What if we took another step more and another step more and another step more? And you start getting the ability to drive that awareness with a group and then extending that. So don't the biggest thing about data literacy and lineage, it can't just live with me and my team. It's got to be a way that the next person understands it that's not on the team, and that next person understands it's not on the team, because then all those people start speaking the same language. The best meeting conversations you'll ever have in the business is when you've created something and someone else is talking about it in a way as if they created it. And that's the best part whatsoever. You have to have no ego in this organization and what we do, because what you want to do is create things in a way that this stakeholder has no technical experience, can take this information, talk highly sophisticated about it, treat it as if it's own, and be able to convey that out to the organization. Let those folks know, and which they will, that your teams and other teams that are part of that are creating that, and that's where the value is coming from, and that's not going to be missed. But what's going to make more is the ability for you, like I said in previous, is lift that other individual up, and they can actually convey the information that that you're presenting as well.
So that's great. You mentioned that you should take the ego out of it, because it's one thing that you are the purveyors of truth in the business, as we mentioned before, and you gotta kind of bring that forward, and you got to get this truth to the right people and inspire them and move them to use that to make better decisions. So that's one element of it. That's one of the active element of, okay, I got to take this thing, I got to communicate it, I need to be proactive with it. And then on the other side, you have like a more passive approach, not in a negative way, when, okay, I'm absorbing information, I'm listening to people, and I'm putting myself aside to make someone else successful and just really enjoy the fruits of this whole dynamic. Now, then we kind of arrive at this question of, as a data transformation leader, what kind of values and virtues do you think that we should really embody? So when we think about a virtue, as the ancient Greeks conceptualized it, it's a habit of character. So when it comes to putting the ego aside, that's more like humility. But at the same time, you have another type of virtue that's also difficult, that's connected to courage, which is assertiveness. So the same question about art and a science, where do you see the ideal data transformation leader kind of stand between those? Do you think that they are at odds with each other, or what's your take on this?
Oh, I don't. I think you have to have a little of both. I think humility is something that it's something you gain over time by understanding that everything that we're doing is bigger than oneself, right? You have to understand that there's a lot of things that individuals are working really hard to do, and you're part of that. But you're part in order to lift those folks up, and you're also part of that in order to make them seem as valuable in the business, to be valuable, and for everyone else to succeed. So humility is also, you're talking about egos. In the world we live in today, we live in a state of imperfection when it comes to data. You can present information in every which manner, but the route to get there requires a lot of steps in order to cultivate that data, whether a company's, been a company that's 30 years old to a company that's 30 days old, right? It's something that from a tech stack, it's something that you're going to imprint your hands on, or you're going to be part of the people that have been imprinting those hands on, and you're going to rely to imperfection. There's just things out of your control. So when data has that imperfection, you can lose confidence in the organization because of your inability of the data quality, or wrong reports, or you've been there. Everyone's been there where someone sees something and their first inclination is, well, now everything's wrong, right? So you have to build that, but by doing so, the humility aspect is by understanding A, that's going to happen, and B, your proactive nature, and to be able to. So this is assertiveness, be able to understand that it's going to happen. You're going to stand behind it, but you're going to do the right things in preparation for it, that if it does happen, you're going to be able to quickly adjust. You're going to be able to quickly find it and quickly correct it. And if you do those things in the combination of sorts, where you're assertive in terms of your process and your strategy, you're creating the right mechanisms to catch, you're creating the right mechanisms of quality management, the right mechanisms to understand the business and catch yourself. But at the same time, you have the humility that the imperfection lies, that there's other things that you may not know as you're putting this together that you need from other folks. And you tie those two strings together, I feel like you're in a harmonized approach where the business feels confident about what you're doing. They know you're trying to go as fast as possible for them and their business. So they also are empathetic to the imperfections that do come up, but then they also know they have the confidence in you, your assertiveness and your strategy, to be able to correct, and they're able to convey and stand behind the work that you do. So, there's always going to be a constant poking into the business about things that are built and analytics and complexity and those things. And the simplistic nature that you drive it obviously helps. But having those qualities, especially yourself, but in your team as well, of that humility and understanding those interactions and understanding, to have that approach and wipe that ego away, you can actually have those conversations easier, and then also you can just gain that confidence within the organization. So so far I'm very fortunate to be successful in that way, and then having folks that have those same qualities, because if when you do, it's so much helpful for the organization to understand that we're all trying to run really fast, break a lot of things, as people would say, but also build for the best, intentions in the organization. And by doing so, we're able to have that balance of assertiveness and humility.
Absolutely. And you mentioned your team. And I think this is a very important element because so when you look at a data science team or an analytics team, so these guys who are actually good at that job, they're usually very highly educated, very well qualified. The business spends a lot on them, just on the salaries, right? It's like we're talking like 150, sometimes $200,000 annual salaries just for a data scientist, right? Or even higher. And these guys are amazing at building these new tools that can really go like 300 miles an hour like a Ferrari. But all that money that's being poured into a data science team like this, including the technology that they are using, the opportunity cost and all that, what we've seen is that sometimes they just simply don't fulfill their potential because there is a lack of connection with the business. It's great that you mentioned that this is the kind of attitude that your team also needs to embody when it comes to these because these are ultimately soft skills of how do they communicate, how do they listen, how do they deploy these tools in the business through that. How have you approached it during your career, training them and enabling them? Do you think that you as a leader should lead by example, or are you also using some targeted training tools to upskill them in those areas to make sure that they fulfill their potential?
Yeah, so just out the gate, yeah, you have to lead by example. You have to also put in that sweat equity as well. You have to understand what involves in the work in the day-to-day. It's not meaning that you need to be doing the day-to-day. I'm not saying a leader, an executive over owning the analytic strategy needs to go in and be writing Python code on a daily basis or building out reports, but you need to have a connection to that and understand what type of work goes into it. And that then we talk about building a relationship with your stakeholders. Building that relationship and confidence with your team is huge. If you are able to have that same empathy with, a team member who's, asked to do something pretty significant, a lot of pressure, and is, someone that is highly sought after and could do and perform a task, but has a lot of obstacles in their way, whether it's distractions or, folks trying to, get them to do, maybe it's, not be able to focus on the priorities. My role in all of this, and everyone's role in here, I believe, it's to support and to clear out those challenges and those obstacles, and to be the one that makes sure that they can perform their job at the highest level. By doing that, and for them to able to complete those products, it's then also to lift them up and to give them visibility in the organization. I find that, to your point, where that technical and business, there's that fuzz, there's that fogginess between the two, and they're able to connect, is because those folks sometimes stay behind the scenes and they're not able to be, understood or even interacted with. They're just more of a support arm, right, or a service desk ticket. And what I, and so far in my career, where I feel like I've been successful to those folks, is by introducing them and allowing them to have a stage and help coach them into those stage on how they need to convey and how they need to interact with the business, get them in front of certain folks. And I have to say, every time doing that so far, not only do you get the best reaction out of your team, which is, wow, now I'm interacting with somebody in a senior leadership role that, that I haven't interacted for, mostly on the technical side. Now I'm understanding their business and I'm getting this new interaction and someone else that, in the organization, something I may be interested in, but also on the other side, that other person saying, wow, I'm getting a real one-to-one connection with the technical support in the organization, I'm able to like spit my business requirements and say, hey, I'm just having a lot of trouble doing X, Y, and Z. And they're able to gather those requirements and make this for me. You start really breeding like a really strong relationship of your team and known as your team that's ingrained inside the business is what you would hear. And so it's, from my standpoint, leading by example is a big part. Hiring, just folks that understand, what we're trying to do in an organization. I think the quote that, you talked recently, there's someone that's one of my mentors. It's not even on the analytics side. A guy named Tom Peterson has just been around, the whole business side of things. He says, there's folks that are from successful companies, and then there's successful folks from companies, right? And finding those folks that are successful in companies, those are the ones that you seem that can be able to drive in both of those aspects of the organization. And they're able to understand that it takes more than just building out, products or technical products, so to speak, but it takes more about speaking to the business oriented functions and gathering those and cultivating that relationship. And so for me, my role is to coach them up on how that's successful. My role is to tell them, let them, support them. My role is to show them that I understand, when someone comes in with some sort of project that I know requires a significant amount of labor, intensiveness, data stitching, et cetera, that on the outside, the agnostic businesses say, hey, can we have this by, a speedy turnaround or whatever that may be? My role is to be able to convey that very quickly, that that's not the case, or to negotiate with them and say, we can get part of this in X time and part of this in Y time, and then, work on this. And then also when we run into those hurdles, my role is to come in and support them and to be very upfront with the business and talk about where those troubles, hey, data that we thought was available is not. We're going to have to go through this massive type of exercise in order to get it where it's at, and really help that individual, give them that coverage in order for them to be successful. So as a team, I think the best way to say it is, leading by example, showing that support, ingraining myself in what they're doing so that I can articulate and understand the requirements of the tasks at hand, and then set, very high expectations, but with very open conversation, so that if those expectations are too high, finding that happy medium of why is there too high is because they don't have enough time. It's a skill set that, they're just adapting and understanding. Would they be more suitable for another project instead? And by doing so, I've been fortunate enough to have a core group of individuals that, have really just been there for me, and really, I'm just the steering head. I'm just the person on the wheel at this point, and they're the one creating all the value and really getting the ship where it's going.
Yeah, that's amazing. And those were great insights, Charles. Genuinely, I really enjoyed the conversation. There's so much more to talk about, but unfortunately, we have to always land the plane. And I think we got to that point. I think we treated the topic with, respect and curiosity. I think we kind of explore the different elements of good storytelling. I always like to refer to this Trinitarian nature of storytelling. So you have the storyteller, like where the story comes from. This is how you should position yourself as a leader. What kind of qualities should you embody? Then there's the storytellee, or the receiver of the story, which is your audience. And this is how you need to be open, the application of empathy on a strategic and tactical level, making sure that you build the right solutions for the right people. And then the third element is the story shared in between. What is analytics? What are we doing here? How can I inspire you and move you with a moving story? So as a final question, do you have some words of advice for the data storytellers of the future who want to take advantage of this decade of data that's upon us and want to make sure that they can leave a mark in this scene, which is still kind of like the Wild West, and there will be a lot of winners, and they want to be one of them?
Sure. Yeah, I would say, maybe the saying is, don't try to know more than you don't know. It's that's probably, don't try to perceive that you know more than you don't already know. Understand that there's a lot of questions to be asked in the business. I think where a lot of times we get in trouble as data storytellers is we think we are the smartest or the most knowledgeable about areas of the business than we aren't. There's folks that either someone that's been ingrained in the company for a long period of time that you can learn from, or somebody that's been from a multi-number of industries you can learn from. You can learn the good and the bad and the ugly along the way. But if you do that and you take that mindset of understand there's a lot more to learn and a lot more to gain as you go into organizations, then I feel you set yourself for success, because not only do you create the relationship with those stakeholders by asking those questions about what they know and gaining that perspective and knowledge, and you have them part of the process, but you really start becoming ingrained in the business. You really start being able to connect the dots and don't be, the next advice would be don't be shy to learn more business than analytics, so to speak, right? You have that skill set and technical skill set, but don't be shy to, how does a ERP system work? How does a supply chain fulfillment, network work? Why do things happen the way they are? What does the worker at the fulfillment center have to do? Why does it take, this long to be able to ship a product? Why is it this costly? If you start learning those things, I feel it sets you up for a lot of success going forward. And you're able to really relate the business problems and the business needs into the technical products that you need to create.
I think that's spot on, and I think that's a perfect note to finish on. So, Charles, appreciate your time. This was great. We hope that we can have you on board to share some of your additional insights with our members at some point in the future as well. And really enjoy the conversation, and all the best.
Likewise. Thanks, Laz. Appreciate it.